Marcus Chun poured water directly onto his CEO's laptop while she sat working, and Victoria Ashford's scream shattered the 3 a.m. silence. The janitor had just committed what looked like an unforgivable act of sabotage, but the hidden malware he'd glimpsed in the screen's reflection was already stealing everything. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go! The water glass trembled in Marcus Chun's hand as he stood frozen in the doorway of the executive suite. 3 in the morning was supposed to be his time, the quiet hours when the towering glass fortress of Meridian Technologies belonged to him and his cleaning cart. The fluorescent lights hummed their lonely song, and the city below glittered like a constellation of earthbound stars. This was when he could think, when he could breathe, when he didn't have to be anything more than invisible. But tonight, someone had broken the sacred rule of his solitude. The CEO's office door stood open, spilling warm amber light into the dark hallway. Inside, he could hear the frantic clicking of keyboard keys, punctuated by frustrated sighs. Marcus hesitated, his fingers tightening around the handle of his cart. He knew that sound. It was the sound of desperation, of deadlines pressing down like physical weight. He had made that sound himself once, in another life, in another world. He should have turned around. Protocol was clear. Janitorial staff were to avoid executives at all costs, especially the notoriously demanding CEO, Victoria Ashford. She was a legend in the building, a woman who had built Meridian Technologies from a garage startup into a billion-dollar cybersecurity empire in just 8 years. People spoke her name with reverence and fear in equal measure. She was known for her brilliance, her ruthlessness, and her complete intolerance for incompetence. Marcus had seen her exactly 3 times in the 2 years he'd worked at Meridian. Each time she had walked past him as if he were part of the furniture, her heels clicking in authoritative rhythm on the marble floors, her eyes fixed on some distant strategic horizon. He preferred it that way. Invisibility was his armor now, his shield against a world that had taken everything from him and left him with nothing but a mop and a bucket. But something made him pause. Perhaps it was the desperate quality of those keystrokes, or perhaps it was the memory of his 7-year-old daughter's face that morning when she had asked him if they could afford to buy new shoes for her field trip. She had smiled when he said yes, not knowing that yes meant he would skip lunch for the next 2 weeks. That smile was his reason for everything now, his North Star in a life that had lost all other navigation. Marcus took a breath and knocked softly on the doorframe, clicking stop. A sharp voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Come in, but make it quick. I'm in the middle of something critical." He pushed his cart into the office, keeping his eyes down in the practiced manner of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. The room was magnificent, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist design, the kind of space that cost more per square foot than his entire apartment. Victoria Ashford sat behind a desk made of dark walnut and chrome, her dark hair pulled back in a severe knot, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen in front of her. She didn't look up, just the trash. Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be out of your way in a moment." "Fine," she muttered, waving a dismissive hand. Her attention never left the screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with an almost violent intensity, and Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the rigid set of her jaw. Whatever she was working on, it was consuming her entirely. Marcus moved through the office with practiced efficiency, emptying the small wastebasket near her desk, wiping down the glass coffee table by the leather sofa. He had learned to move like a ghost, to complete his tasks without disturbing the important people who inhabited these spaces. But as he passed behind her desk to clean the window ledges, something caught his eye. A reflection in the dark glass of the window, a flicker of something on her laptop screen that didn't belong. His body went cold. It had been 4 years since he had worked in cybersecurity, 4 years since he had been anything other than a janitor, but some things you never forgot. That was malware. Sophisticated malware, the kind that didn't just steal data but opened backdoors, created pathways for hackers to walk right into a company's most protected system. Marcus froze, his cleaning cloth forgotten in his hand. He watched the reflection in the window as Victoria continued to type, completely unaware of the digital poison spreading through her system. Every keystroke, every password she entered, every file she accessed was being recorded, copied, sent to someone who meant her company harm. Meridian Technologies held the cybersecurity infrastructure for half the Fortune 500 companies in America. If someone had access to Victoria's laptop, they had access to everything. He should have walked away. It wasn't his problem. He had left that world behind when his life had imploded, when his wife had died in a car accident and left him alone with a 3-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical debt. He had given up his career, his passion, his entire identity to take care of Emma. He'd become a janitor because the hours were flexible and the work didn't follow him home, because he couldn't afford to care about anything except keeping a roof over his daughter's head and food in her stomach. But the malware kept spreading. He could see it in the reflection, lines of code multiplying like cancer cells. In minutes, it would be too late. The hackers would have everything they needed. Meridian Technologies would be compromised, and with it, hundreds of other companies. Millions of people's data, their financial information, their security, all of it would be vulnerable. The breach would be catastrophic. Marcus's hands began to shake. His throat felt tight. He thought of Emma, sleeping peacefully in their tiny apartment 3 miles away, watched over by his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. He thought of the careful, quiet life he had built for them, the life where he kept his head down and didn't make waves and traded his dreams for stability. If he said something now, if he revealed what he saw, he would shatter that carefully constructed invisibility. People would ask questions. They would want to know how a janitor could recognize advanced malware. They would dig into his past and he would become visible again. Exposed, vulnerable. But if he said nothing, if he walked away and pretended he hadn't seen what he had seen, then everything he had once believed in would be a lie. He had spent 10 years of his life building security systems, protecting people from exactly this kind of attack. He had been good at it once. Brilliant even. People had called him one of the best young cybersecurity analysts in the industry. He had believed that his work mattered, that he was making the world safer one firewall at a time. The water glass on Victoria's desk caught the light. It was crystal, expensive, filled halfway with what looked like sparkling water. Marcus stared at it, his mind racing. There was only one way to stop the malware transfer immediately. Only one way to prevent the hackers from completing their theft. He had to shut down the laptop, had to force an immediate disconnect before the final packets of data could be sent. His hand reached out before his mind could fully process the decision. Time seemed to slow down as his fingers closed around the glass. He lifted it, feeling the weight of the cold crystal in his palm, and in one smooth motion, he poured the entire contents directly onto Victoria Ashford's laptop. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Victoria's chair flew backward as she leaped to her feet, her eyes wide with shock and fury. Water cascaded across the keyboard, seeping into the vents, spreading across the touchpad. The screen flickered once, twice, and then went black. The office filled with the sound of Victoria's sharp intake of breath, a prelude to what Marcus knew would be a devastating eruption of rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed, voice breaking the 3 a.m. silence like shattering glass. Her face had gone pale, then flushed deep red with anger. "You have any idea what you've just done?" That laptop contains 6 months of work. 6 months. Presentations, contracts, negotiations. Everything. Marcus set the empty glass down carefully on the desk, his hands remarkably steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "but your computer was compromised. There was active malware on it, and it was in the final stages of a data transfer. I had to stop it immediately." Victoria stared at him as if he had just sprouted a second head. Her mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. The silence stretched, taut, and dangerous. Then she found her voice, and it was cold enough to freeze the air between them. "You're telling me that you, a janitor, poured water on my laptop because you think you saw malware?" She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "That's the most ridiculous excuse for incompetence I've ever heard." "Security," she barked, reaching for her phone. "I'm calling security right now. You're not just fired, you're going to be charged with destruction of company property." Marcus felt the familiar walls closing in, the weight of consequences he had tried so desperately to avoid. But something had shifted inside him when he made the decision to pour that water, something that had been dormant for 4 years. He met Victoria's eyes directly for the first time, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority he had forgotten he possessed. "Ma'am, before you make that call, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My name is Marcus Chun. 4 years ago, I was a senior cybersecurity analyst at Blackstone Defense Solutions. I specialized in advanced persistent threat detection and nation-state level cyber attacks. What I saw on your screen was a variant of a Russian app called Ghost Protocol. It's designed to be completely invisible to standard antivirus software. It embeds itself in legitimate system processes and creates encrypted channels for data exfiltration. The fact that it was active on your laptop means someone has had access to everything on this machine for at least the last 72 hours. Victoria's hand had frozen halfway to her phone. The color had drained from her face again, but this time it wasn't anger. It was fear. "How?" she whispered. "How could you possibly know that just from seeing my screen?" "Because I helped design the original detection algorithms for Ghost Protocol when I worked for Blackstone," Marcus said. "I know what it looks like. I know how it behaves. And I know that if I hadn't stopped the transfer when I did, your company would be facing the largest data breach in its history by tomorrow morning." The phone slipped from Victoria's fingers and clattered onto the desk. She sank slowly back into her chair, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. The fury had evaporated, replaced by a sharp, calculating assessment. She was seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time. "Prove it," she said finally. "Prove to me that you're not just making this up to cover your own mistake." Marcus looked at the ruined laptop, water still pooling around its edges, and felt a strange calm settle over him. This was the moment that would either validate everything or destroy the fragile life he had built. He had crossed a line, stepped out of the shadows, and there was was no going back now. Question was whether Victoria Ashford would listen, or whether security would be dragging him out of the building in handcuffs within the next 10 minutes. Do you have another computer, he asked, his voice steady. A desktop, a tablet, anything that connects to your network? Victoria's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out an iPad. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unlocked it and handed it to him. If you're lying to me, if this is some kind of elaborate scam, I will make sure you never work anywhere again. I will personally see to it. I understand, Marcus said, taking the device. He opened the network settings and began navigating through system files with a speed and confidence that came from muscle memory. His fingers moved across the screen and practiced patterns, accessing hidden directories and log files that most people didn't even know existed. He could feel Victoria watching him intently, her sharp mind processing every move he made. This iPad is clean, he said after a moment. It hasn't been compromised yet. But your laptop was the primary target. Let me show you something. He pulled up the network activity logs and pointed to a series of entries. See these connection timestamps? These are outgoing data packets from your laptop to an IP address registered in Belarus. They started 73 hours ago, right after you opened an email attachment. Victoria leaned forward, her face pale. I don't remember opening any suspicious attachment. I'm careful about that sort of thing. That's what makes Ghost Protocol so effective, Marcus explained, falling into the rhythm of teaching, of explaining complex concepts in ways people could understand. It was a muscle he hadn't used in years, but it came back instantly. The attachment probably looked completely legitimate. A PDF from a trusted colleague, maybe a contract or a presentation. The file itself was probably real and functional, but embedded in the metadata was a payload that executed the moment you opened it. No warning, no obvious sign, just clean, quiet infiltration. He pulled up another screen showing lines of code that meant nothing to Victoria but everything to him. The malware creates what we call a persistence mechanism. Even if you reboot your computer, it comes back. It hides in your startup processes, disguises itself as legitimate system files. To standard antivirus software, it looks like normal Windows operation, but what it's actually doing is creating an encrypted tunnel out of your net, bypassing all your firewalls and security protocols. Victoria's hand went to her throat, a gesture of unconscious vulnerability. What kind of data did they get? What do they have? Everything, Marcus said quietly, and the single word landed between them with devastating weight. Every email you've sent or received in the last 3 days. Every document you've accessed. Every password you've entered. If you logged into your company's financial systems, they have that. If you accessed client databases, they have that too. And worse, once they have your credentials, they can move laterally through your entire network. Your laptop was just the entry point. The real target is everything Meridian Technologies protects. The color drained completely from Victoria's face. She stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her silhouette stark against the city lights below. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. We protect the data infrastructure for over 200 Fortune 500 companies, banking systems, healthcare records, government contracts. If someone has access to our core systems, the breach could affect millions of people. Marcus watched her process the magnitude of what he was telling her. He saw the exact moment when the shock transformed into something else, something harder and more focused. This was why she was CEO. She didn't collapse under pressure. She converted it into fuel. She turned back to him, her eyes sharp and clear. What do we do? How do we stop this? First, we need to isolate your network immediately, Marcus said, his mind already running through the protocols he hadn't used in years. Every system that your laptop touched needs to be taken offline and scrubbed. We need to identify every device that might have been compromised and cut them off before the hackers realize we're onto them. Right now, they think their operation is still running smoothly. The moment they realize you've disconnected, they'll try to burn everything and cover their tracks. Victoria nodded sharply and reached for her phone. She dialed a number from memory. Richard, she said when someone answered, her voice all business now. I don't care that it's 3 in the morning. I need you and the entire IT security team in the building within 30 minutes. This is a code red situation. We have a confirmed breach. There was a pause as the person on the other end responded. Victoria's expression hardened. I don't care if it's your anniversary. I don't care if you're in Maui. Get on a plane or consider yourself unemployed. She ended the call and looked at Marcus. My head of IT security will be here soon. You'll need to brief him on everything. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. This was where it got complicated. Richard Torrance was the head of IT security, and Marcus knew his reputation. He was territorial, defensive, deeply insecure about his own expertise. Having a janitor expose a massive breach that his systems had completely missed would be a humiliation Torrance wouldn't easily forgive. But there was no alternative now. The situation was too critical for politics. Victoria must have seen something in his expression because she asked, "What is it? What aren't you telling me?" It's nothing, Marcus lied. He'll need access to your network logs and administrative privileges to start the isolation process. She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through his deflection. But she simply nodded and moved to her desk. Pulling out a leather-bound notebook, she scribbled something on a page, tore it out, and handed it to him. These are my administrative credentials. Use them to do whatever needs to be done. I'm authorizing you full access to our systems. Marcus stared at the piece of paper in his hand, at the passwords that could unlock every door in Meridian Technologies' digital empire. This level of trust was staggering, especially given that 30 minutes ago she hadn't even known his name. Ma'am, are you sure about this? I'm a janitor. Your team is going to have questions about why you're trusting me with this level of access. Right now, you're the only person in this building who knows what we're actually facing, Victoria said firmly. My head of security missed this completely. My $1 million cybersecurity systems missed this completely. You saw it in a reflection in a window while you were supposed to be emptying my trash can. So yes, I'm sure. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Who you are right now is exactly who I need. The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. For 4 years, he had defined himself by what he had lost, by what he could no longer be. He was a widower, a struggling single father, a man who mopped floors to pay the rent. But standing in this office, holding those credentials, briefing the CEO on a nation-state level cyber attic, he felt a forgotten part of himself stirring back to life, the part that had once been brilliant, capable, essential. The sound of rapid footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of the first members of Victoria's team. Richard Torrance burst through the door, a heavy-set man in his 50s with thinning hair and an expression of barely controlled panic. He was followed by 3 younger staff members, all looking disheveled and confused. "Victoria, what's going on?" Torrance demanded. "Your message said code red. Has there been a breach? Why wasn't I notified through official channels?" "Because the breach came through my personal laptop and we only discovered it 20 minutes ago," Victoria said crisply. She gestured to Marcus. "This is Marcus Chun. He's going to brief you on what we're facing." Torrance's gaze swung to Marcus, and his eyes narrowed with confusion, and then something darker, suspicion. "Who is this? Is he a consultant? I don't recognize him from any of our approved vendors." "Marcus is our night custodial staff," Victoria said, her tone making it clear she would tolerate no argument. "He also happens to be a former senior analyst from Blackstone Defense Solutions with expertise in advanced persistent threats. He identified the malware on my system. He saved us from what could have been a catastrophic breach." The room went dead silent. Torrance's face cycled through several colors, finally settling on an ugly shade of red. "A janitor," he said, the word dripping with contempt. "You're telling me that a janitor identified a breach that my entire security team missed? That's absurd. It's impossible. And yet here we are," Victoria said coldly. "Now I suggest you put your ego aside and listen to what he has to say, because every second we waste is another second those hackers have access to our systems." Torrance's jaw clenched, but he gave a curt nod. "Fine. Brief us." Marcus took a breath and stepped forward. He felt the weight of their stares, the skepticism and hostility radiating especially from Torrance. But he also felt something else. Purpose. For the first time in 4 years, he had a problem to solve that mattered, that required everything he knew and everything he had once been. He began to explain the malware, the data exfiltration, the timeline, and the urgent steps they needed to take. As he talked, he watched the skepticism in the room slowly transform into alarm and then into grim determination. They were beginning to understand. The company they had all worked to build was under attack, and the clock was ticking. But Marcus could see something else in Richard Torrance's eyes, something cold and calculating. The head of security wasn't just listening to the briefing. He was planning something, and Marcus had a sinking feeling that when this crisis was over, there would be hell to pay. The conference room had transformed into a war room. Laptops covered every surface, their screens glowing with cascading data streams and network maps. The IT security team had swelled to 12 people, all moving with the controlled urgency of professionals facing a crisis. Marcus stood at the head of the table, a digital whiteboard behind him covered in diagrams and IP addresses, and for the first time in 4 years, he felt like himself again. "We've isolated 17 compromised devices so far," he explained, pointing to nodes on the network map displayed on the main screen. All of them were accessed using credentials harvested from Victoria's laptop. The malware created what I call a spiderweb pattern. Each compromised device became a new entry point, spreading outward through the network. But there's good news. They haven't reached the core servers yet. We caught them in the peripheral systems. "How much time do we have before they realize we're onto them?" asked Sarah Chun, one of the senior network engineers. She was a sharp woman in her 30s who had been the first to accept Marcus's expertise without question, perhaps because she recognized the depth of knowledge in his explanations. "That depends on how sophisticated their operation is," Marcus replied. "If they're monitoring their data streams in real time, they already know something's wrong. If they're on a scheduled check-in system, we might have a few hours. Either way, we need to move fast. Our priority is to identify every compromised credential, lock them down, and then scrub every affected system clean." Richard Torrance had been silent for most of the briefing, sitting at the far end of the table with his arms crossed. Now he leaned forward, his voice heavy with barely concealed hostility. "I want to know how you can be so certain about all of this. You claim to have identified this malware from a glimpse at a screen. That's not how cybersecurity analysis works. It takes tools, forensic software, detailed investigation. What you're describing is impossible. Marcus met his gaze steadily. He had known this challenge was coming. You're right that normally it would require extensive analysis, but I spent 2 years at Blackstone specifically studying Ghost Protocol variant. I helped develop the signature recognition patterns. When you've looked at something that many times, you recognize it the way you'd recognize a face in a crowd. The specific file naming convention, the encryption patterns in the network traffic, the way it disguises itself in the Windows Task Manager, all of it adds up to a fingerprint I know by heart. Convenient, Torrance sneered. And now you expect us to believe that a janitor who claims to have been out of the field for 4 years just happened to retain this encyclopedic knowledge? I don't expect you to believe anything, Marcus said quietly. The evidence speaks for itself. Every device we've examined has confirmed the presence of the malware exactly where I said it would be. Every credential I flagged as compromised has shown suspicious access patterns. You can question my background all you want, but you can't question the results. Victoria, who had been watching the exchange with narrowed eyes, stood up. Richard, that's enough. Marcus has been right about everything so far. Instead of attacking his credibility, why don't you focus on doing your job and helping us contain this breach? She turned to Marcus. What's our next step? We need to set a trap, Marcus said. Right now, the hackers think they still have access. They don't know we've isolated the infected devices. We can use that to our advantage. We create a honeypot, a fake environment that looks like your real network but is actually completely isolated. We feed them false data, make them think they're still successfully extracting information. While they're focused on the honeypot, we can trace the connection back to its source and identify who's behind this. That's actually brilliant, Sarah said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. I can have a virtual environment spun up in 30 minutes. We mirror your network architecture, populate it with realistic but fake data. And while they're busy stealing useless information, we clean our real systems and lock them down, added James Park, another team member who had warmed to Marcus. By the time they realize they've been had, we'll have closed every door they open. The energy in the room shifted. What had been skepticism was now becoming collaboration. The team was starting to work together, and Marcus felt the old rhythm of it. The symphony of expertise coming together to solve a complex problem. This was what he had missed. What he hadn't realized he needed. Not just the intellectual challenge, but the sense of purpose, of being part of something larger than himself. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, his neighbor. Emma woke up asking for you. I told her you had to work late. She's back asleep now, but kept asking when you'd be home. The message was followed by a photo of his daughter, curled up on the couch with her favorite stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. Marcus's throat tightened. It was nearly 5 in the morning. It should have been home hours ago. Emma would wake up in 2 hours, expecting him to make her breakfast, to help her get ready for school, to be the constant presence in her life that had become his entire identity. But here he was, standing in a corporate war room, doing work that he had walked away from because it had consumed too much of his life when his wife was dying. Everything okay? Victoria asked quietly. She had moved to stand beside him, her eyes on his phone screen before he could hide it away. Just my daughter, Marcus said. She woke up and I wasn't there. This is past my normal time to be home. Victoria's expression softened in a way he hadn't seen before. The hard edges of the CEO facade cracked slightly. How old is she? 7. It's just the 2 of us. My wife passed away 4 years ago. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and there was genuine emotion in her voice. I didn't know. Look, once we get this honeypot deployed and the team knows what to do, you can head home. They can handle the monitoring and cleanup. Marcus shook his head. I need to see this through. If something goes wrong, if the hackers realize what we're doing, the team needs to know how to respond. I can't leave them halfway through this. Even if it means missing time with your daughter, Victoria asked. It wasn't a challenge, just a genuine question. He looked at her, this powerful woman who had built an empire, who commanded rooms full of people with a single word, and he saw something familiar in her eyes. Exhaustion, the weight of responsibility, the cost of always putting the job first. He wondered what she had sacrificed to build Meridian Technologies. What parts of herself she had left behind in conference rooms and late-night strategy sessions. My wife used to tell me that I was so busy protecting the world's data that I forgot to protect what mattered most, Marcus said quietly. She died while I was in Dubai consulting on a security installation. I got the call that she'd been in an accident and I was 8,000 miles away. By the time I got home, I'd missed my chance to say goodbye. He looked down at the photo of Emma on his phone. I swore I'd never let work take precedence over her again. That's why I became a janitor. The hours are predictable. The job doesn't follow me home. I can be the father she needs, but you're here now, Victoria observed, doing this work, putting yourself back in that world. Because if I don't, millions of people could be hurt, Marcus said. Because sometimes the choice isn't between right and wrong, it's between wrong and more wrong. Jaw tight. But once this is contained, once your company is safe, I go back to my life. I go back to being invisible. This is a one-time thing. Is it though? Victoria asked softly. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's been hiding from who he really is. And I don't think hiding has made you happy. The words hit harder than Marcus expected. He wanted to argue, to defend the choices he had made, but the truth was more complicated. He had told himself that he was being a good father by giving up his career, by choosing stability over ambition. But had he been protecting Emma? Or had he been protecting himself? Had he been avoiding the pain of his old life, the memories of his wife's absence during those critical last months, the guilt of choosing work over presence? The moment stretched between them, loaded with unspoken understanding. Victoria wasn't just talking about him. She was talking about herself too, about the costs of their choices, about the parts of themselves they had buried to survive. Sarah's voice broke the tension. Honeypot is live. I'm routing the compromised credentials through the virtual environment now. If anyone tries to access the network using those credentials, they'll end up in our trap instead of the real systems. Marcus pulled himself back to the present, pushing his personal thoughts aside. He moved back to the main screen. Good work. Now we monitor and wait. If they take the bait, we'll have a direct line to trace back to their location. He looked around at the team. Everyone stay sharp. The next few hours are critical. As the team settled into their monitoring stations, Marcus felt Victoria's presence beside him. She handed him a cup of coffee. Black. The way he realized she must have noticed he drank it. When this is over, she said quietly, we need to talk about what comes next for you. There is no next, Marcus said. I told you, this is temporary. We'll see, Victoria replied, a small, knowing smile on her lips. In my experience, you can't go back once you've remembered who you really are. Marcus wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she was right. Something had shifted in him tonight. A door he thought he had locked forever had been thrown open, and he wasn't sure he could close it again. The sun rose over the city in shades of pink and gold, painting the glass towers in warm light. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, his coffee long since cold in his hand, watching the world wake up below. Behind him, the security team worked in focused silence, their eyes fixed on screens that tracked every digital movement through the honeypot network. They had been at it for 3 hours now, and so far nothing. The hackers hadn't taken the bait. Maybe they're onto us, James said, stifling a yawn. Maybe they detected the honeypot and backed off. Or maybe they're just on a different time zone, Sarah countered. If this is a Russian operation like Marcus suggested, they might not be active during our night. Give it time. Marcus checked his watch. It was 6:30 in the morning. Emma would be waking up in 30 minutes. Expecting him to be there with her favorite breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast cut into triangles. Mars. Rodriguez had texted twice more during the night, assuring him that Emma was fine, but he could read the concern between the lines. 7-year-olds needed routines, needed stability, and he was breaking that stability right now. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to Mrs. Rodriguez. Something came up at work. Can you get Emma ready for school and walk her to the bus? I'll make it up to her tonight, I promise. The words felt like a betrayal even as he sent them. This was exactly what he had sworn he wouldn't do. This was exactly how it had started before. One emergency turning into two turning into a pattern, the pattern turning into a lifestyle where work always came first. His phone rang immediately. It was Mars Rodriguez. He stepped out into the hallway to answer. Marcus, is everything all right? She asked, her voice warm with concern. You've never missed a morning with Emma. Not once in 2 years. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. Something happened at work, something important. I can't explain right now, but I need to see it through. Can you help me out just this once? There was a pause on the other end. Of course I can, dear. But Marcus, that little girl worships you. You're her whole world. Whatever's happening at work, just make sure it's worth what you're giving up to be there. The words settled in his chest like stones. I will, he promised. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. Tell Emma I love her and I'll see her tonight. When he returned to the conference room, Victoria was standing where he had been, looking out at the sunrise. She glanced at him as he approached. Family troubles. Just arranging childcare, Marcus said. I should have been home an hour ago, but you're still here. She turned to face him fully. Why? And don't tell me it's just about duty or obligation. I've built a career on reading people, Marcus Chun. There's something else keeping you in this room. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the team work. Because for 4 years, I've felt like half a person, he finally admitted. I've been a good father, I think. I've kept Emma safe and fed and loved, but there's this part of me that I buried, this part that used to solve puzzles and build systems and protect things that mattered. Being in this room, doing this work, it's like finding a limb I didn't know I'd lost. And that terrifies you, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. It does. Because I gave this up for a reason. I gave it up because it took me away from my wife when she needed me most. I gave it up because I couldn't bear the thought of Emma growing up the way I grew up, with a father who was always at the office, always saving the world, but never home for dinner. Victoria nodded slowly. My daughter is 16. She lives with her father in Boston. I see her twice a month if I'm lucky. She barely knows me. When she calls, she asks to speak to my assistant to schedule time with me like I'm a doctor she needs an appointment with. Her voice carried a weight of old pain. I built this company by sacrificing everything else. I told myself it was worth it, that I was building something important, something that would change the world, and maybe I did, but I lost my family in the process. Marcus looked at her with new understanding. That's why you knew, he said. That's why you could see right through my excuses, because I've used the same ones, Victoria said. I've stood in rooms just like this one, telling myself that just one more deal, just one more late night, just one more sacrifice, and then I'd have time for the people who mattered. But there's always one more. The work never ends, Marcus. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price it demands. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp exclamation from Sarah. We've got activity. Someone's accessing the honeypot with Victoria's credentials. Marcus moved to her station immediately, his personal concerns evaporating as his professional focus snapped into place. Show me. The screen displayed a stream of network traffic, data packets flowing from an external IP address into their fake environment. Marcus watched the patterns, recognizing the signature movements of the Ghost Protocol malware. The hackers were in the honeypot and they had no idea it was a trap. They're going for the financial databases first, James observed. Smart. That's where the most immediately valuable data would be. But they're also probing the client management system, Marcus. They're not just after money. They want everything. Client lists, contracts, security protocols. This is an intelligence operation, not just a theft. Can we trace them back? Victoria asked, moving to stand behind Marcus. Can we find out who they are? We can try, Marcus said. Sarah, start running the tracer route protocols. Let's see if we can follow this connection back to its source, but be subtle about it. If they detect our trace, they'll disconnect immediately and we'll lose them. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm routing the trace through multiple proxy servers to mask our signature. This is going to take a few minutes. The room held its collective breath as the trace began to work its way back through the layers of the internet, peeling back proxies and encryption like layers of an onion. Marcus watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, each percentage point a small victory. They were close. They were so close to identifying who was behind this attack. The trace completed. An address appeared on the screen along with a map pinpointing a location. Minsk, Belarus, Sarah read. The IP address is registered to a known cybercriminal organization called the Volkov Group. They're one of the most sophisticated hacking collectives in Eastern Europe. They've been linked to attacks on banks, energy infrastructure, even government agencies. This is bigger than we thought, James said, his face pale. If the Volkov Group targeted us specifically, this wasn't a random attack. This was planned, coordinated. Someone hired them. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to Victoria. Do you have any enemies? Any competitors who might want to destroy Meridian Technologies? Victoria's expression hardened. In my business, I have dozens, but hiring a group like Volkov, that takes serious money and serious intent. That's not just competition, that's corporate warfare. We need to document everything, Marcus said. Every piece of evidence, every log file, every trace. This isn't just about protecting your company anymore. This is criminal activity at the highest level. You need to bring in the FBI, maybe even Homeland Security. Richard Torrance, who had been conspicuously silent during the entire operation, suddenly spoke up. Absolutely not. We're not bringing in federal authorities. Do you have any idea what that would do to our reputation? Our clients trust us to keep their data secure. If word gets out that we were breached, even if we caught it, we'll lose billions in contracts. We were breached, Marcus said, turning to face him. That's not speculation, that's fact. And trying to cover it up instead of reporting it is not just unethical, it's illegal. If any of your clients' data was compromised, you have a legal obligation to notify them. You don't get to make that call, Torrance snapped. You're not even officially part of this company. You're a janitor who got lucky. Victoria, surely you see the wisdom in handling this internally. We've contained the threat. We've identified the source. We can quietly strengthen our security and move on without destroying our reputation in the process. Victoria looked between the two men, her expression unreadable. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was weighing the options, measuring the costs. He knew what the smart business decision was. Torrance was right that going public with a breach could devastate the company's reputation. Clients would flee, stock prices would plummet, years of work could be undone in a single press release. But he also knew what the right decision was, and he needed to believe that Victoria, for all her corporate ruthlessness, would choose what was right over what was profitable. The silence stretched, tense and heavy. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice clear and decisive. We report it. All of it. The breach, the malware, the Volkov Group connection, everything. She looked at Torrance, her expression hard as steel. I didn't build this company by hiding from the truth, Richard. I built it by being better than everyone else. And part of being better means having the integrity to admit when we've been compromised and taking responsibility for it. You're making a mistake, Torrance said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. No, Victoria replied. The mistake was already made when our security failed to detect this breach. What I'm doing now is making sure we don't compound that mistake by trying to cover it up. She turned to Marcus. Draft a full report. Include everything. I want it on my desk by noon. I'll be making calls to our legal team and preparing notifications for our clients. Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of respect for this woman who had just chosen principle over profit. It was the kind of decision that could cost her everything, and she had made it without hesitation. As the team dispersed to begin documenting the breach, Richard Torrance stood and walked out of the room without another word. Marcus watched him go, and a sense of unease settled over him. Torrance had been humiliated, outmaneuvered, and overruled. Men like that didn't forget. They waited for their moment, and then they struck back, but that was a problem for later. Right now, Marcus had a report to write and a company to save. Marcus finally made it home at 2 in the afternoon, 12 hours past the end of his normal shift. His body ached with exhaustion. His eyes burned from staring at screens, and his heart felt heavy with the weight of decisions that had pulled him further from the life he had carefully constructed. The apartment was empty when he walked in, silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Emma would still be at school for another hour, which gave him time to shower and maybe catch a few minutes of sleep before she got home. He stood in the doorway of her room, looking at the carefully made bed, the stuffed animals arranged in precise order on her pillow, the drawings taped to the walls. She had drawn a picture of the two of them just last week, two stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. The caption, written in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, read, "Me and Daddy, best friends forever." He felt a lump form in his throat. What was he doing? What was he risking? His phone buzzed. It was a text from Victoria. "Report is excellent. Legal team reviewing now. Client notifications going out tomorrow morning. FBI wants to meet with you directly. They're calling you a hero." There was a pause, then another message. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." He sat on the edge of Emma's bed, holding the phone, staring at words that should have made him feel proud, but instead filled him with a complicated mixture of satisfaction and dread. Hero. He had been called that before in his old life after stopping a major breach at a healthcare company that would have exposed millions of patient records. He remembered the praise, the recognition, the sense of importance. He also remembered coming home that night to an empty house because his wife had been too sick to wait up, and finding her asleep on the couch with tear tracks on her face. Front door open. Emma's voice, bright and full of life, called out, "Daddy, are you home? Mrs. Rodriguez said you had to work late. Are you okay?" He quickly wiped his eyes and stood up, putting on a smile. "In here, sweetie. Come tell me about your day." Emma appeared in the doorway, her backpack nearly as big as she was. Her face lit up with joy at seeing him. She dropped the backpack and ran into his arms. He caught her, lifting her up and holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and playground dust. "I missed you this morning," she said, pulling back to look at him with those serious eyes that were so much like her mother's. "Rodriguez makes good breakfast, but she cuts the toast wrong. You do it in triangles, she does it in squares." "I'm sorry, baby," Marcus said, carrying her to the living room and settling onto the couch with her in his lap. "Something important came up at work. It won't happen again." Emma studied his face with the unsettling perception that children sometimes have. "You look different," she observed. "You look tired, but also like you're thinking about something big." "Just work stuff," he said, trying to brush it off. "Nothing for you to worry about." But she wasn't ready to let it go. "At school today, we talked about what our parents do for jobs. Mrs. Chun asked me what you do, and I said you're a janitor." She tilted her head. "But Mrs. Rodriguez told me once that you used to do something with computers. Something really important. Why did you stop?" Marcus felt his breath catch. He had known this question would come eventually, but he hadn't expected it today, not when he was already feeling so raw and uncertain. "Because I wanted to spend more time with you," he said, which was true, but not the whole truth. The computer job took me away a lot. I had to travel and work late nights. I didn't get to see you as much as I wanted." "Do you miss it?" Emma asked. "The computer job?" He looked into her eyes. These perfect windows into a soul that trusted him completely, that believed he could do no wrong. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I don't miss it as much as I would miss you if I went back to doing it." She seemed to consider this, her little brow furrowed in thought. "Mommy used to say you were a superhero with computers. She said you saved people from bad guys who tried to steal their information." She looked up at him. "Did you really do that?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes again. "Your mom thought everyone I helped was like saving someone, but it was just a job, sweetie. Not as important as being here with you." Emma shook her head seriously. "I think maybe it was important, and being with me is important. Maybe both things can be true." She hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy. Even if you're tired and thinking about big things." He held her close, this wise little person who saw things so clearly and wondered when she had become so perceptive. "I love you too, babe, more than anything in the world." The evening passed in their usual routine, dinner and homework and a bath, but Marcus found his mind wandering, even as he helped Emma with her math worksheet, explaining addition and subtraction with patient repetition. Part of him was still in that conference room, still tracking data patterns, still solving the puzzle. He had forgotten how intoxicating it was to be good at something, to use his mind at full capacity, to matter in a way that extended beyond the walls of his small apartment. After Emma was asleep, Marcus sat at their tiny kitchen table with his laptop open in front of him. He had told himself he was just checking his email, but his fingers had automatically navigated to cybersecurity forums, industry news sites, articles about the latest threats and vulnerabilities. He read about new malware variants, sophisticated phishing schemes, the ongoing cat-and-mouse game between hackers and defenders. It was a world he had walked away from, but it was still his language, still his passion. His phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Marcus, I hope I'm not calling too late." Her voice sounded different than it had in the office. Less formal, more uncertain. "I wanted to check in, see how you're doing after everything today." "I'm fine," he said automatically, the default response. "Just got my daughter to bed. Back to normal life." "Is it though?" Victoria asked. "Normal? Because I have a feeling that today changed something for you. And I saw it in your eyes, the way you came alive when you were working the problem. That wasn't someone just doing a job. That was someone doing what they were meant to do." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Can't, Victoria. I have responsibilities. I have a daughter who needs stability, routine, a father who's present. I can't go back to that life." "I'm not asking you to," she said. "I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe you don't have to choose between being a good father and being the person you were meant to be professionally. There is no middle ground in cybersecurity, Marcus said. It's all-consuming. You can't do it halfway. Either you're in completely or you're not in at all. That's what you believe because that's how you did it before, Victoria countered. But what if you're wrong? What if there's a way to do meaningful work and still be home for dinner? What if the problem wasn't the work itself, but the way you approached it? Marcus wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because what if she was right? What if he had been so traumatized by his failure to be present for his wife that he had overcorrected, throwing away a part of himself that Emma needed to see? What kind of example was he setting for his daughter by hiding his talents, by choosing safety over purpose? The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow, Victoria said. They're investigating the Volkov Group connection, and they need your expertise. They specifically requested you by name. I'm a janitor, Marcus said weakly. No, Victoria said firmly. You're a cybersecurity expert who happens to work as a janitor. There's a difference. And I think it's time you stopped hiding from who you really are. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. Somewhere in the apartment below, a baby was crying. Somewhere above, someone was playing music too loud. These were the sounds of his life, the ordinary rhythms of survival. But underneath them, he could hear another sound, a calling he had tried to silence, but that refused to stay quiet. He thought about Emma's words. Maybe both things can be true. Maybe he could honor his wife's memory not by running from the work he had loved, but by finding a way to do it that didn't cost him everything. Maybe the real tribute to Sarah wasn't becoming invisible, but becoming the kind of father who showed his daughter that you could be brilliant and present, passionate and responsible, important to the world and still home for triangular toast. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to Victoria. The words flowed easily, surprising him with their clarity. He proposed a consultation arrangement, specific hours, clearly defined boundaries, work that would utilize his expertise but wouldn't consume his life. He offered to help strengthen Meridian's security protocols, to train the team, to be available for critical situations but not for day-to-day operations. He set his terms, his non-negotiables, the lines he wouldn't cross. When he hit send, he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't a return to his old life. It was something new, something he was building from the pieces of who he had been and who he had become. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. His phone buzzed immediately. Victoria's response was short. Yes, to all of it. Let's talk details tomorrow after the FBI meeting. Marcus closed his laptop and walked to Emma's room. He stood in the doorway watching her sleep, her chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths, her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. I'm going to show you that you can be brave, he whispered into the darkness. I'm going to show you that hiding isn't the same as protecting. I'm going to be the father you deserve and the man I was meant to be. He didn't know if he could pull it off. He didn't know if the balance he was attempting was even possible, but for the first time in 4 years, he was willing to try. The FBI field office was nothing like Marcus had imagined. Instead of the sterile, intimidating environment he expected, he was led to a comfortable conference room with windows overlooking the city. 2 agents greeted him, Special Agent Catherine Morrison and Special Agent David Chun. They were professional but warm, treating him not as a witness but as an expert whose opinion they valued. Chun, thank you for coming in, Agent Morrison said, gesturing to a chair. We've reviewed your report on the Meridian breach, and frankly, it's some of the most thorough analysis we've seen. You connected dots that most security professionals would have missed. Marcus sat down, still feeling out of place in his worn jeans and button-down shirt. He had dressed as nicely as he could, but he was acutely aware that he didn't look like the cybersecurity expert they thought he was. He looked like exactly what he was, a working-class, single father who was in way over his head. I just documented what I saw. What you saw potentially stopped one of the largest corporate espionage operations we've been tracking, Agent Chun said, opening a folder filled with documents. The Volkov Group has been on our radar for 3 years. They're responsible for over $2 billion in stolen intellectual property and financial fraud. But they're ghosts. We can never get close enough to build a case. Your honeypot operation gave us our first real lead. The agent spent the next hour walking Marcus through the details of the breach, asking technical questions that he answered almost without thinking. It was like speaking a language he had forgotten he was fluent in, the words and concepts coming back effortlessly. They showed him other attack patterns, other suspected Volkov operations, asking for his analysis and insights. This one here, Marcus said, pointing to a network diagram of a breach at a pharmaceutical company 6 months earlier. This has some of the same signatures, but the execution is different, less sophisticated. I think this might have been a training run, someone learning the tools before deploying them on a bigger target like Meridian. Agent Morrison leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. Can you elaborate on that? Marcus pulled the diagram closer, his mind working through the patterns. The malware deployment here used a standard phishing email. Nothing sophisticated. The data exfiltration was clumsy, Isley detected if anyone had been looking, but the core code structure is similar to what we saw at Meridian. It's like watching a pianist practice scales before performing a concert. Same fundamental techniques, but without the Polish. The two agents exchanged glances. Mr. Chun, how would you feel about consulting with us on an ongoing basis? Agent Morrison asked. We have a cybercrime task force that could benefit enormously from your expertise. It would be contract work, flexible hours, well compensated. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. The slippery slope from one consultation to complete immersion. I appreciate the offer, but I have a daughter. I can't commit to anything that would take me away from her. We're not asking you to join the Bureau, Agent Chun said with a slight smile. We're asking you to review case files when you have time, maybe participate in the occasional video conference. Think of it as remote consulting. You'd be helping us catch criminals who hurt millions of people, and you'd do it from your kitchen table. It sounded almost too good to be true, which made Marcus suspicious. But he also couldn't deny the pull he felt, the sense that this was exactly the kind of work that had once given his life meaning. Can I think about it? Of course, Agent Morrison said. Take all the time. She handed him her card. But Mr. Chun, I want you to know something. What you did at Meridian, recognizing that breach and acting on it, that took real courage. You could have walked away. Most people in your position would have, but you chose to step up, even though it meant risking the quiet life you'd built. That tells me a lot about your character. Her words stayed with Marcus as he left the FBI building and headed to Meridian Technologies for his meeting with Victoria. The morning had been a strange collision of worlds. The father who made triangle toast existing in the same space as the expert who tracked international cybercriminals. He wasn't sure how those two versions of himself could coexist, but he was starting to believe it might be possible. Victoria's office looked different in daylight. The space that had felt so sterile and imposing at 3 in the morning now felt almost welcoming. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows and warming the cool modern furniture. Victoria herself looked different too, less like the untouchable CEO and more like a person, her hair down around her shoulders, her expression open and genuine. So she said as he sat down across from her desk. How did the FBI meeting go? They want me to consult for them, Marcus said. Case reviews, pattern analysis, that kind of thing. That's incredible, Victoria said, and she seemed genuinely pleased. But you're not sure if you should accept. I told myself I was done with this world, Marcus admitted. I built a life where I didn't have to think about malware and hackers and data breaches, where I could just focus on being a good father. And now everyone's trying to pull me back in. Maybe they're not pulling you back, Victoria suggested. Maybe they're helping you move forward. There's a difference. She leaned back in her chair. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation last night, about the choices we make and what we sacrifice. I built this company by telling myself that success required total dedication, that anything less was failure, but I was wrong. What I actually needed was balance, and I was too stubborn to see it. Marcus studied her. This powerful woman who ran a billion-dollar company but couldn't see her own daughter more than twice a month. What changed your mind? Watching you, she said simply. Watching you walk out of this building yesterday to go home to Emma, even though there was still work to be done. Watching you set boundaries and stick to them. You showed me something I'd forgotten, that the people we love have to come first or everything else is meaningless. The honesty in her voice caught Marcus off guard. He had thought of Victoria as invulnerable, a woman made of steel and ambition. But sitting here now, he could see the cracks in her armor, the regrets, and the loneliness. I want to hire you formally, Victoria said, shifting back to business. Not as a janitor, as our director of security consulting. You'd set your own hours, work remotely when possible, but be available for critical situations. The pay would be significantly more than what you're making now. Enough to give Emma opportunities you can't currently afford. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. It was everything he had proposed in his email, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real and terrifying. What about Torrance? He's not going to be happy about this. Richard Torrance will adapt or he'll find employment elsewhere, Victoria said, her voice hardening slightly. He's head of IT security and our security failed catastrophically. He's lucky I'm not firing him. If he has a problem with you being brought on as a consultant, that's his issue to manage, not yours. There was something else in her tone, something protective that made Marcus wonder if this was about more than just business. But before he could analyze it further, Victoria's assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Ashford, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation you need to know about. What kind of situation? Victoria asked. The assistant glanced at Marcus uncertainly. Then back to Victoria. Richard Torrance has been talking to the board members. He's raising concerns about the handling of the breach, suggesting that bringing in outside consultants, she paused meaningfully, particularly ones with unconventional backgrounds, represents a lapse in judgment. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was exactly what he had feared. Torrance was launching a counterattack, using Marcus's presence as ammunition against Victoria. Let him talk, Victoria said, her voice ice cold. Schedule a board meeting for tomorrow. I'll address their concerns directly. After the assistant left, Victoria turned back to Marcus. Marcus. Don't worry about Richard. He's positioning himself politically because he knows his job is on the line. This is about his insecurity, not about your qualifications. But he has a point, Marcus said. I'm a janitor with a 4-year gap in my employment history. From the board's perspective, I'm a liability. From the board's perspective, you're the person who saved this company from a catastrophic breach, Victoria countered. You're the person the FBI specifically requested to consult with. You're the person who saw what an entire security department missed. She met his eyes. I'm not backing down on this, Marcus. The question is, are you going to let Richard Torrance's insecurities stop you from accepting a position you're more than qualified for? Marcus thought about Emma, about the opportunities this job could provide, the financial security, the chance to use his skills for good while still being present in her life. He thought about his wife's voice, the way she used to tell him he had a gift, that hiding it away was a waste. He thought about the last 4 years, the safety and the numbness and the slow erosion of the person he used to be. I accept, he said, the words feeling like jumping off a cliff, but I need guarantees. I need it in writing that I can't be required to travel without advance notice. I need my hours capped at 30 per week, and I need flexibility to handle anything that comes up with Emma, school events, doctor appointments, everything. Done, Victoria said without hesitation. I'll have legal draw up a contract today. She stood and extended her hand across the desk. Welcome to Meridian Technologies, Director Chun. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the warmth of her smile. It felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. He was stepping into a new version of his life, one that terrified him but also filled him with a hope he hadn't felt in years. But as he left her office and walked through the halls of Meridian Technologies, no longer invisible but now someone people would notice, someone they would judge, he couldn't shake the feeling that Richard Torrance's whispered campaign was just the beginning. He had made an enemy, and enemies in corporate environments knew how to strike where it hurt most. The first week in his new role was a careful dance of boundaries and expectations. Marcus worked primarily from his apartment, setting up a small office space in the corner of the living room where he could monitor Meridian's security systems while still being present for Emma. He walked her to the bus stop every morning, picked her up every afternoon, and helped with homework at the kitchen table before diving into vulnerability assessments and threat analyses. Emma seemed fascinated by the change. She would stand at his elbow while he worked, watching the streams of data on his screen with wide eyes. What are all those numbers, Daddy? She asked one evening, pointing to a network monitoring tool. They're like footprints, he explained, pulling her into his lap. When people use computers, they leave little trails behind. My job is to look at those trails and figure out if someone is walking where they shouldn't be. Like a detective, she said, her face lighting up with understanding. Exactly like a detective. He kissed the top of her head, marveling at how she could make everything seem simple and clear. The work that had once consumed him now existed in defined containers, specific hours where he was fully engaged, and then he closed the laptop and was fully present for her. It was a balance he had thought impossible, but so far it was working. Victoria checked in daily, sometimes with work questions, but often just to see how he was managing the transition. Their conversations had taken on an easy familiarity that surprised them both. She would call during her lunch break, and they would talk not just about security protocols and threat assessments, but about the mundane challenges of parenting, the exhaustion, the worry, the moments of unexpected joy. My daughter called me yesterday, Victoria told him one afternoon. Actually called me, not my. She wanted to know if I'd come to her school play next. Her voice carried a mixture of hope and disbelief. That's wonderful, Marcus said, hearing the emotion beneath her words. Are you going to go? I already cleared my calendar, Victoria said. The board meeting I had scheduled that day will just have to be rescheduled. Some things are more important than quarterly reports. It was a small thing, but Marcus heard what she wasn't saying. She was learning, just as he was, that being present required constant, conscious choice, that it was easy to let work swallow everything if you didn't guard against it vigilantly. But the calm couldn't last. Richard Torrance had been quiet since Marcus's appointment, professionally cordial in meetings but distant and cold. Marcus had hoped that maybe Torrance would accept the new reality and move on, but he should have known better. Men like Torrance didn't accept defeat. They regrouped and waited for an opening. The opening came on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus was working on a routine security audit when his phone rang. It was the school. Miss Orr. Chun, this is Principal Matthews at Riverside Elementary. I'm afraid Emma has been in an incident. She's fine, but we need you to come pick her up immediately. Marcus's blood ran cold. What kind of incident? Is she hurt? She's not physically injured, the principal said carefully, but there was an altercation with another student. Some things were said. I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Marcus grabbed his keys and was out the door in seconds, his heart pounding. Emma had never been in trouble at school. She was quiet, well-behaved, the kind of child teachers love. What could have possibly happened? He found her in the principal's office, sitting in a chair that was too big for her, her eyes red from crying. The moment she saw him, she burst into fresh tears. Daddy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to make it stop. Marcus knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. Hey, it's okay. Whatever happened, we'll figure it out together. Can you tell me what's going on? Principal Matthews, a kind woman in her 50s, spoke gently. Emma got into a verbal altercation with another student, a boy named Tyler Morrison. According to witnesses, Tyler was saying things about you, about your job, calling you names. Emma defended you and things escalated. She pushed Tyler, and he fell and scraped his knee. Marcus felt anger flare hot in his chest. What kind of things was Tyler saying? The principal hesitated, then sighed. He was calling you a fake, saying that his father said you were just a janitor pretending to be important, that you were going to get fired for lying about your credentials. The anger crystallized into cold understanding. Tyler Morrison, as in Special Agent David Morrison from the FBI. The principal nodded, and Marcus's mind raced. How would a 7-year-old boy know anything about his employment history unless someone had deliberately shared that information, twisted it, and spread it specifically to cause harm? Richard Torrance. It had to be. Somehow he had gotten information about Marcus to someone who knew Agent Morrison, probably through corporate channels or mutual acquaintances. The FBI agent's son had likely overheard adult conversations and repeated them at school, with the cruelty that only children could manage. Emma gripped his hand tighter. I told Tyler he was lying. I told him you were a hero who saves people from bad guys. But he just kept saying mean things, and I got so mad, Daddy. I pushed him, and I shouldn't have pushed him, but I wanted him to stop. Marcus pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs. You were defending me, and that was very brave. But pushing someone is never okay, even when you're angry. Do you understand? She nodded against his chest. I'm sorry. Am I in big trouble? You're suspended for the rest of the day, Principal Matthews said. Given the circumstances and the fact that Tyler's words were provocative, we're not pursuing further disciplinary action. But, Merchant, I think you should know that there have been whispers among the parents. Questions about your background, your sudden career change. It seems like someone is deliberately spreading rumors. Marcus felt a protective fury rise in him, not for himself, but for Emma. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts and corporate politics. I understand, he said quietly. Thank you for handling this with sensitivity. He took Emma home and they sat together on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder. I don't understand why that boy said those mean things, she whispered. You do have an important job. You saved the company. Ems. Victoria told me so when I met her. Marcus went very still. You met Victoria? When? Last week when you went to that meeting. She came by to bring you some papers and I answered the door. She smiled at him. Her tears finally dried. She's really nice, Daddy. She asked me about school and my drawing, and she said you were one of the smartest people she'd ever met. A warmth spread through Marcus's chest, complicated and confusing. Victoria had never mentioned meeting Emma. She had simply dropped off documents as if it were a routine errand, but she had taken the time to talk to his daughter to make her feel seen and valued. It was a kindness he hadn't expected. A glimpse of the woman behind the CEO facade. That evening after Emma was asleep, Marcus called Victoria. He told her about the incident at school, about Tyler Morrison, about the deliberate campaign to undermine him through his daughter. His voice shook with barely controlled anger as he spoke. Victoria listened in silence until he finished. Then her voice came through, cold and sharp as a blade. This ends now. Richard has crossed a line. Going after you professionally is one thing, but using your child? That's unconscionable. Victoria, I appreciate your support, but I don't want to escalate this. Emma's already been hurt enough. I just want it to stop. And it will stop, Victoria said firmly. But not by us backing down. It will stop because Richard Torrance is going to learn that there are consequences for his actions. She paused, her voice softening. Marcus, I met Emma. I didn't mention it because it felt too personal, too much like crossing a boundary. But I want you to know that she's remarkable. She's smart and kind, and she clearly adores you. You've done an incredible job raising her alone. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Thank you. That means more than you know. I mean it. And I'm not going to let Richard Torrance or anyone else make her feel like her father is anything less than extraordinary. Trust me on this. By tomorrow, this situation will be handled. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the dark living room staring at nothing. He had tried so hard to keep his two worlds separate, to maintain the boundaries that would protect Emma from the chaos of his professional life. But those worlds were colliding, and he was powerless to stop it. The question now was whether bringing them together would destroy everything he had built or transform it into something stronger. The next morning, Marcus received an email from Victoria with a subject line that simply read this. Attached was a memo going out to all Meridian Technologies staff and being released to industry publications. It was a detailed account of the breach, Marcus's role in stopping it, and his credentials and experience. But more than that, it was a passionate defense of his character, written with a personal intensity that went beyond typical corporate communication. Marcus Chun represents the best of what we should aspire to in this industry, the memo read. He's someone who uses his extraordinary gifts not for glory or recognition, but to protect others. Someone who has made sacrifices most of us can't imagine in order to be present for his daughter. Someone who, when faced with a choice between his own safety and doing what was right, chose right without hesitation. I am honored to work with him, and anyone who questions his integrity or his qualifications will answer to me personally. It was signed simply Victoria Ashford, CEO. Marcus read it 3 times, his hands trembling. Victoria had just put her own reputation on the line for him, had made it clear to everyone in the company and the industry that attacking Marcus meant attacking her. It was a bold, risky move, and it was the most profound vote of confidence anyone had given him since his wife died. His phone rang. It was Victoria. Did you read it? I did, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. Victoria, you didn't have to do this. You're making yourself a target. I know exactly what I'm doing, she said. And Marcus? Richard Torrance resigned this morning. effective immediately. Apparently, he decided that his talents would be better utilized elsewhere. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a complex mixture of relief and guilt. I never wanted anyone to lose their job. He didn't lose his job because of you, Victoria said firmly. He lost it because he chose to wage a campaign of harassment against a colleague and that colleague's child. Those were his choices, and he's facing the consequence. You have nothing to feel guilty about. After they ended the call, Marcus walked to Emma's room and watched her sleep. This innocent person who had been dragged into battles she didn't understand. He had thought protecting her meant keeping her away from his work, keeping his two lives separate. But maybe protection meant something different. Maybe it meant showing her that you stood up for what was right even when it was hard, that you surrounded yourself with people who had integrity, that you didn't let fear make your decision. 3 weeks after Richard Torrance's resignation, Meridian Technologies was running smoother than it had in years. Marcus had implemented a comprehensive security overhaul, training the IT team in advanced threat detection and building systems that could catch the kind of sophisticated attacks that had nearly destroyed the company. The FBI had made significant progress on the Volkov Group case, with Marcus's analysis providing crucial breakthroughs. But more than the professional victories, something else was changing. Something Marcus hadn't anticipated and didn't quite know how to name. Victoria had started showing up at his apartment. It began innocently enough. She needed him to review a security proposal in person, and it was easier to come to him than to ask him to come downtown. But then she came back the next week to discuss the FBI consultation parameters, and then the week after that to bring him updated network schematics. Each time, she stayed a little longer. Each time, Emma greeted her with more enthusiasm, pulling her into conversations about school projects and showing off her latest drawings. On a Saturday afternoon, Marcus opened his door to find Victoria standing there with no briefcase, no papers, no professional excuse for the visit. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked almost nervous. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I was in the neighborhood and thought maybe Emma would like to go to the park, the one with the carousel she mentioned. Marcus stared at her, caught completely off guard. You want to take Emma to the park? I want to take both of you to the park, Victoria corrected, a slight smile touching her lips, if that's okay. I know it's forward of me, but I've been thinking lately that I'd like to see what it's like to do something normal, something that doesn't involve conference rooms or quarterly projections. Emma appeared behind Marcus, her eyes lighting up. Miss Victoria, are you really taking us to the park? Can Daddy push me on the swings really high like he always does? Victoria's smile widened, genuine and warm. As high as you want, but you have to show me how to do the monkey bars. I was never very good at those The park was bathed in golden afternoon light, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the distant music from the carousel. Marcus watched as Emma dragged Victoria toward the playground equipment, chattering away about her class field trip and her favorite ice cream flavor, and a boy named Jake who put a frog in the teacher's desk. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at Emma's dramatic retelling. He pushed Emma on the swings while Victoria sat on a nearby bench, her phone tucked away in her bag, completely present in the moment. When Emma ran off to join a group of kids playing tag, Victoria moved to stand beside Marcus. She's wonderful, she said quietly. You've raised an amazing little person. I've tried, Marcus said, watching Emma's pigtails fly as she ran, her laughter carrying across the playground. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Other days I think maybe I'm doing okay. You're doing more than okay, Victoria said. She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes, something soft and vulnerable that made his breath catch. You're doing what I failed to do. You're being present. You're choosing her every single day. That's not barely keeping your head above water, Marcus. That's being a hero in the way that actually matters. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Marcus found himself unable to look away from her, from the way the sunlight caught in her dark hair, from the openness in her expression that he had never seen in the boardroom or the office. This wasn't the CEO. This was just Victoria, a woman who was lonely and trying to find her way back to the parts of herself she had lost. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Why are you really here? It's not about work, it's not about Emma, not entirely. So why? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching the children play. Because you make me remember what it feels like to hope, she finally said. Because when I'm around you and Emma, I can see what my life could have been if I'd made different choices. And instead of making me sad, it makes me think maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can still have that connection with my daughter. Maybe I can still be more than just a title and a bank account. It's not too late, Marcus said. Your daughter is 16. That's hard age, but it's not too late. If you show up, if you're consistent, if you choose her the way you're learning to do, she'll come around. Victoria nodded, but there were tears in her eyes. I'm so tired of being alone, she whispered. I'm so tired of going home to an empty apartment and having no one to talk to about my day. No one who cares if I'm happy or sad or scared. I built this empire and I have no one to share it with. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. A protective tenderness he hadn't felt since his wife died. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. The touch was simple, just his fingers wrapping around hers, but it felt monumental. You're not alone right now. Victoria looked down at their joined hands, and a single tear traced down her cheek. When she looked back up at him, the vulnerability in her eyes had transformed into something else, something that looked like courage. Marcus, I need you to know that what's happening between us, it's not about work. It's not about gratitude for what you did for the company. It's about you, the person you are. The father you are. The way you make me want to be better. Before Marcus could respond, Emma came running back, breathless and excited. Daddy, there's a face painting booth. Can I get a butterfly, please? The moment broke, but the connection remained. Victoria squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Of course you can get a butterfly, she said to Emma, her voice steady despite the emotion. Let's all go together. Spent the rest of the afternoon in a bubble of unexpected happiness. Victoria paid for Emma's butterfly face paint and got a small flower painted on her own hand. They rode the carousel together, Emma between them, laughing as the painted horses went up and down. They got ice cream cones that dripped in the warm sun, and Emma taught Victoria how to catch the drips with her tongue before they fell. As they walked back to Marcus's car, Emma reached up and took Victoria's hand, swinging it between them. This was the best day ever, she announced. Can Victoria come to our house for dinner? Marcus looked at Victoria over Emma's head, a question in his eyes. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. I would love to. Dinner was simple, spaghetti with marinara sauce and a salad. Nothing fancy, but Victoria acted like it was a 5-star meal. She helped Emma set the table, admired the crayon drawing Emma had made in her honor, and laughed when Emma told terrible knock-knock jokes between bites of pasta. Marcus watched them together and felt something he had thought was dead forever stirring back to life. It wasn't just attraction, though. It was the possibility of wholeness, of building something new from the broken pieces of their separate lives. After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Victoria sat on his small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling in the darkness, and the air was cool and comfortable. I haven't had a day like this in years, Victoria said, cradling her wine glass. Maybe ever. I can't remember the last time I just existed without an agenda, without calculating the return on investment of every moment. Emma has a way of making everything simple, Marcus said. She reminds me constantly that the best things in life are free. Swings and ice cream and terrible jokes. She's not the only one who does that, Victoria said, turning to look at him. You do it too, Marcus. You remind me that success isn't about the size of your bank account or the title on your business card. It's about the people you love and whether you're there for them when it matters. They were sitting close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive but not overpowering, close enough that when she turned to him, her face was just inches from his. He could see the questions in her eyes, the hope and the fear in equal measure. He knew that if he kissed her right now, everything would change. The careful professional boundaries they had maintained would crumble. The friendship they had built would transform into something more complicated and more risky. But he also knew that he wanted to kiss her more than he had wanted anything in 4 years. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was. She wasn't just successful or brilliant or powerful, though she was all those things. She was someone who saw him completely, who understood his struggles because she shared them, who had helped him find his way back to himself without asking him to sacrifice his daughter. Victoria, he whispered, her name a question and a confession. I know, she whispered back. I know it's complicated. I know we work together. I know you have Emma to think about. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea. But Marcus, I need you to know that I'm falling for you. I'm falling for the way you make triangle toast and push swings and see through complex malware in seconds. I'm falling for all of you. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't seem to know she had shed. Terrified, he admitted. The last time I let myself care about someone, I lost her. The last time I let work matter, it cost me everything. I don't know how to do this without being afraid. Then we'll be afraid together, Victoria said. She leaned forward, closing the last inches between them, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Marcus kissed her back, when his arms came around her and pulled her close, it became an answer that said yes, he was willing to try. Yes, he was willing to risk his heart again. Yes, he believed that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from their broken pieces. For 3 months, Marcus lived in a state of cautious happiness he had thought would never be his again. He and Victoria navigated their relationship with careful attention to boundaries, keeping their professional and personal lives as separate as possible. At work, she was still the CEO and he was still the security consultant. But in the evenings and on weekends, they became something else entirely. They became a family in the making. Emma adored Victoria, and the feeling was mutual. Victoria started joining them for dinner twice a week, always bringing thoughtful gifts. A book Emma had mentioned wanting, art supplies, once a telescope because Emma had expressed interest in the stars. She never tried to replace Sarah, never overstepped, but she carved out her own space in their lives with a gentle persistence that won both father and daughter over completely. The transformation in Victoria was remarkable. She started leaving work at 6, delegating more, trusting her team. She flew to Boston every other weekend to see her daughter, and slowly, painfully, that relationship began to heal. Marcus would get text messages from her during those visits, small updates that showed progress. She smiled when she saw me today. We had an actual conversation that lasted more than 5 minutes. She asked me to come to her soccer game next month, but happiness, Marcus was learning, always came with a cost. fast, and the bill for his came due on a Tuesday morning when his security monitoring system triggered an alert that made his blood run cold. It was 4 in the morning, and he had been up late working on a threat assessment for the FBI. He had fallen asleep at his desk, and the alarm jolted him awake with its insistent beeping. On his screen, he saw patterns that looked sickeningly familiar. Someone was trying to breach Meridian's network again, using methods that bore the distinctive signatures of the Volkov group. But this time, the attack was different, more aggressive, more personal. The intrusion attempts were targeting not just the company's general systems, but Victoria's personal accounts, her private files, everything. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, erecting emergency barriers, isolating systems, tracking the attack vectors. But even as he worked, he could see that this was more sophisticated than the original breach. Whoever was behind this had learned from their previous failure. They were using zero-day exploits, vulnerabilities that hadn't been publicly disclosed yet, and they were moving fast. He grabbed his phone and called Victoria. The line rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Marcus? What's wrong?" "We're under attack," he said, his voice tight with tension. "It's Volkov again, but this time they're targeting you specifically. I need you to disconnect from any network immediately. Turn off your phone, your laptop, everything. Right now." He heard the rustle of sheets, the sound of her coming fully awake. "How bad is it?" "Bad. They're not trying to steal data this time. They're trying to plant something. Fabricated evidence. Fake documents. I can see the file names they're creating. Financial fraud, insider trading, bribery. Victoria, they're trying to frame you for crimes you didn't commit." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Victoria's voice came back hard as steel. "Can you stop it? I'm trying, but they're good. Really good. I need to bring in the FBI, and I need to do it now. This isn't just corporate espionage anymore. This is a coordinated attack designed to destroy you personally." Within the hour, Marcus's apartment had transformed into a command center. The FBI's cybercrime team set up equipment in his living room, and Victoria arrived looking shaken but determined. Emma woke up to the chaos, confused and frightened by all the strangers in their home. "What's happening, Daddy?" she asked, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Why are all these people here?" Marcus knelt down to her level, keeping his voice calm despite the crisis unfolding around them. "Some bad people are trying to hurt Ms. Victoria, and we're trying to stop them. But you're safe, I promise. Nothing's gonna happen to you." Emma looked past him to Victoria, who was standing by the window looking out at the city as dawn broke. She walked over to Victoria and tugged on her hand. "Don't be scared. My daddy is the best at catching bad guys. He'll keep you safe." Victoria looked down at Emma, and something in her expression crumbled. She knelt and pulled Emma into a hug, holding her tight. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm so lucky to have you and your daddy in my life." Agent Morrison arrived with a team of specialists, and they worked with Marcus to trace the attack. What they discovered was worse than anyone had imagined. The Volkov group had been planning this operation for months, ever since their original breach had been exposed. They had been systematically gathering information about Victoria, her business dealings, her personal life, building a profile they could exploit, and then they had found their opening. "Marcus. Look at this," Agent Morrison said, pulling up a series of encrypted communications they had intercepted. "They're targeting Marcus too. They know he's the weak link, not because he's incompetent, but because he has the most to lose. They've been monitoring him, learning about Emma, about their relationship. They're planning to threaten his daughter if he doesn't cooperate." Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. Over his dead body, would anyone threaten Emma? He had spent 4 years building a safe, quiet life for her, and these criminals were trying to shatter it. The protective fury that rose in him was primal and absolute. What do they want? They want Marcus to insert backdoors into Meridian's security systems, Agent Chun explained. Permanent access points that would let them walk in and out of the network anytime they wanted. They're planning to use those backdoors to plant evidence against Victoria, destroy the company's reputation, and then extort other clients. It's a long-term operation worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. "And if I don't cooperate," Marcus said, his voice hollow, "they'll go after Emma." Victoria's face had gone pale. "We pull her out of school immediately. We put her in protective custody. We do whatever it takes to keep her safe." But Agent Morrison shook his head. "If we go defensive, we lose. They'll just wait us out. We need to turn this around, use their plan against them." He looked at Marcus. "We need you to pretend to cooperate. Let them think they've compromised you. Feed them false access to a honeypot environment just like we did before. But this time, we're not just tracking them. We're building a case solid enough to take down the entire organization." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "You're asking me to put my daughter at risk, to let these criminals think they have leverage over me while we play games with them. We'll have protection on Emma 24/7, Agent Morrison promised. Plainclothes agents at her school, surveillance on your apartment. She'll be safer than the president. But Marcus, this is our one shot to stop Volkov permanently. If we don't take it, they'll just regroup and try again. And next time, they might actually succeed." The weight of the decision pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Every instinct screamed at him to grab Emma and run, to disappear to some small town where no one would find them. But he looked at Victoria, at the fear in her eyes, at the way she was trying so hard to be strong. He thought about all the other families that would be hurt if Volkov wasn't stopped, all the other children who might become targets. Victoria stepped forward and took his hand. "I will understand if you say no. Emma comes first. She always comes first. If you want to walk away right now, take her somewhere safe. I will support that completely. This is not your burden to carry, but it was his burden." The moment he had poured that water on Victoria's laptop, the moment he had stepped back into this world, he had accepted responsibility for seeing it through. He looked at Agent Morrison. "I'll do it. But if anything happens to Emma, if they get within 100 yards of her, the operation ends immediately. No arguments, no negotiations." "Agreed," Agent Morrison said. "We'll start setting up the sting operation immediately." The next 72 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He went through the motions of being compromised, responding to encrypted messages from the Volkov group, pretending to install backdoors while actually feeding them into a sophisticated trap. He maintained his routine with Emma, walking her to school, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. But underneath the normalcy, he was constantly aware of the plainclothes agents watching their apartment. The security detail following Emma's school bus. Victoria stayed with them during those 3 days. She slept on Marcus's couch, refusing to leave them alone. During the day while Emma was at school, she and Marcus would sit together in silence, holding hands, drawing strength from each other. At night, after Emma was asleep, they would stand on the balcony and Victoria would rest her head on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered on the second night. "This is all because of me, because of my company. You and Emma are in danger because I built something that criminals want to destroy." Marcus turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "You've built something worth protecting. That's not a crime. That's an achievement. And it's an acute of us at protecting us. And if we have the entire FBI protecting us. But what if something goes wrong?" Victoria asked, and there were tears streaming down her face. "I just found you, Marcus. I just started to understand what it means to have a real family. I can't lose that now." "You won't," Marcus promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "We're going to get through this. And when it's over, we're going to have the life we've been building. You, me, Emma, your daughter. We're going to be a family." On the third day, the trap was finally ready. The FBI had identified the physical location where the Volkov group was operating, a warehouse in New Jersey. They had evidence of the entire conspiracy, every communication, every threat, every illegal access attempt. All they needed was for the criminals to take the bait, to try to use the fake backdoors Marcus had installed, and they would have them. Marcus sat at his computer watching the monitoring screens with Victoria beside him and a dozen FBI agents positioned throughout his apartment. Emma was at school, surrounded by so much security she thought she was on a field trip with very serious chaperones, and then it happened. The Volkov group accessed the honeypot thinking they had complete control of Meridian's systems. "We have them," Agent Morrison said into his radio. "All teams move in now." For 20 agonizing minutes, they waited for confirmation. Marcus held Victoria's hand so tightly his knuckles went white, and then Agent Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, and then smiled. "We got them. All of them. 17 arrests in New Jersey, 5 more in Belarus through Interpol. The Volkov group is finished." Victoria collapsed against Marcus, her body shaking with relief. For a long moment, they just held each other while FBI agents packed up equipment around them, their crisis finally over. When they pulled apart, Victoria's eyes were red, but her smile was radiant. "It's over. It's really over." Marcus nodded, feeling the tension that had gripped him for 3 days finally begin to release. He checked his watch. Emma would be getting out of school in 30 minutes. "I need to go pick her up. She's had enough security guards following her around. It's time for things to go back to normal." But when he arrived at the school, Emma wasn't ready for normal. She ran to him across the playground, her backpack bouncing, and threw herself into his arms with such force he stumbled backward. The plainclothes agents who had been watching her gave Marcus nods of acknowledgement before melting away into the crowd of parents. "Daddy, the most amazing thing happened," Emma said, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "Mrs. Peterson said that you and Mrs. Victoria were on the news. She said you're heroes who caught really bad people. Is that true? Are you really a hero?" Marcus knelt down so they were eye level. "I just did my job, sweetheart. A lot of people worked together to catch the bad guys. It wasn't just me." "But you were brave," Emma insisted. "And Victoria was brave. And now everyone knows you're not just a janitor. You're someone who saves people." She hugged him tightly. "I always knew you were special, Daddy. Now everyone else knows too." The drive home was filled with Emma's questions, and Marcus answered as many as he could in 7-year-old appropriate terms. Yes, there had been bad people trying to hurt Ms. Victoria's company. Yes, he had helped stop them. No, she didn't need to worry anymore because those people were in jail. Now, and yes, Miss Victoria was coming over for dinner tonight to celebrate. When they got home, Victoria was already there, having used the spare key Marcus had given her the week before. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a teenage girl with Victoria's dark hair and sharp eyes, looking simultaneously defiant and uncertain. "Emma Marcus," Victoria said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'd like you to meet my daughter, Rachel. She flew in from Boston this afternoon. She wanted to make sure I was okay." Marcus watched as Victoria wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, and Rachel, this tough teenager who had spent years building walls against her mother, leaned into the embrace. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about how much had changed. "You must be the famous Marcus," Rachel said, extending a hand with the formal politeness of someone who had been raised in boarding schools. "Mom talks about you constantly. About you and Emma. She's been different lately. Happier." Marcus shook her hand, seeing the guarded hope in her eyes. "It's good to meet you, Rachel. Your mom talks about you all the time, too. She's very proud of you." Emma, never one to stand on ceremony, walked right up to Rachel. "Do you want to see my room? I have a rock collection, and Daddy says I'm going to be a scientist when I grow up." Rachel looked surprised, then charmed. "Sure, kid. Show me your rocks." As the girls disappeared down the hallway, Marcus and Victoria stood together in the living room. He could see the emotion in her eyes. The overwhelmed gratitude. She came, Victoria whispered. When she heard on the news about the cyber attic and saw my name, she got on a plane without even asking permission from her father. She said she needed to make sure her mom was okay. That's what family does, Marcus said softly. They show up when it matters. I never thought I'd get this chance, Victoria continued, her voice breaking. I thought I'd destroyed our relationship permanently, but you showed me that it's never too late to choose the people you love. You showed me what it means to be present. Victoria, Marcus started, but she held up a hand. Wait, let me say this. She took both his hands in hers. For the last 3 months, I've been falling more in love with you every single day. I love the way you cut toast into triangles. I love the way you explain complicated things to Emma with such patience. I love that you're brilliant and humble and brave, and you don't even realize how extraordinary you are. She took a shaky breath. My life was empty before you poured water on my laptop. It was successful and profitable and completely hollow. Filled it with meaning, with laughter, with hope, and I need you to know that I'm all in. I want this, us, to be real and permanent. I want to build a life with you and Emma. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. From the darkest days after Sarah's death to this moment of unexpected joy. He thought about all the choices that had led him to that office at 3 in the morning. All the decisions that had seemed like mistakes but had actually been pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I want that too, he said, but we have to do it right. Emma comes first, always. And Rachel needs to be part of this family too, not an afterthought. We build this together, all of us, or we don't build it at all. Agreed, Victoria said. We take it slow. We put the girls first. We communicate. We don't let work consume us. She smiled. And maybe, eventually, we think about making it official. Are you asking me to marry you? Marcus asked, half joking, half serious. Not yet, Victoria said with a laugh, but ask me again in a year and my answer might be yes. That evening, the four of them had dinner together. It was chaotic and loud and imperfect, with Emma telling rambling stories and Rachel slowly opening up about her life in Boston. Victoria and Marcus worked together in the kitchen, moving around each other with an easy familiarity, passing plates and stealing glances that made both girls giggle. After dinner, Emma insisted on teaching Rachel her favorite card game, and they sat on the living room floor while Marcus and Victoria cleaned up. Through the doorway, they could hear Emma's patient explanations and Rachel's occasional laughter, and it sounded like the beginning of something beautiful. A month later, the story had made its way through the industry press and into mainstream media. Marcus Chun, the janitor who saved a billion-dollar company, became a minor celebrity. He was offered lucrative positions at 3 different firms, speaking engagements, even a book deal. He turned them all down. Instead, he stayed at Meridian Technologies, working his carefully bounded hours, using his expertise to protect people without sacrificing his presence in Emma's life. The FBI consultation became a regular part of his work, and he discovered he was helping to dismantle criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for years. His analysis and insights became legendary in law enforcement circles, but he never let the recognition change who he was. He was still the dad who packed triangle toast in Emma's lunch and attended every school concert. Victoria transformed her company's culture, implementing work-life balance policies that had been unheard of in the corporate world. She created on-site childcare, flexible hours, and generous family leave policies. Meridian Technologies became known not just for its security expertise, for being one of the best places to work in the industry. And through it all, she made sure she was home for dinner, that she flew to Boston regularly, that she was building the relationship with Rachel that she had neglected for too long. 6 months after the Volkov Group was dismantled, Marcus and Emma moved into a new home. It was bigger than their old apartment, with a yard and a swing set. Victoria helped them move, and Rachel came for the weekend to help unpack. As they assembled furniture and arranged rooms, Emma pulled Marcus aside. "Daddy," she whispered, looking up at him with those wise, knowing eyes. "Are Ems, Victoria, and Rachel going to live with us someday?" Marcus knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Would you like that?" Emma nodded seriously. "I think they're family now. Not like Mommy was family, but a different kind. The kind you choose, out of the mouths of babes." Marcus thought. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. The kind you choose." A year to the day after Marcus had poured water on Victoria's laptop, they gathered in that same office at 3 in the morning. It had become a tradition, a anniversary of sorts, though only the two of them knew about it. Victoria kept a bottle of champagne in her office for this occasion. They toasted to the unlikely series of events that had brought them together. "To Malware," Victoria said with a smile. "To sugar packets and carousels," Marcus added. "To second chances," they said together. As the sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Marcus looked at this woman he had come to love, this powerful CEO who had learned to be vulnerable, who had fought for him when he needed fighting for, who had shown him that it was possible to have both purpose and presence. And he thought about the man he had been a year ago, invisible and hiding, convinced that the best parts of himself were lost forever. That man had been wrong. The best parts weren't lost. They had just been waiting for the right moment to emerge, for the right person to see them, for the right crisis to bring them back to life. He had saved Victoria's company, but she had saved him in return. She had given him permission to be whole again. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. She was spending the night at Rachel's, and the message was a photo of the two girls making silly face camera. The caption read, "Your daughters miss you. Come home soon. Your daughters, Victoria read over his shoulder, her voice soft with emotion. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Marcus said, pulling her close. "So do I." They left the office together as the city woke up around them, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way, who had built something beautiful from a crisis, who had learned that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with romance but with a simple act of courage, with water poured on a laptop, with a choice to step out of the shadows and into the light. And that, more than any corporate victory or professional triumph, was the real happy end.